Our story begins late at night in a residential neighborhood of a small town where there is absolutely no one on the playground and the whole town is asleep. But except that under the tree stands some suspicious guy with a backpack, near which there are scattered really a lot of feathers, which is really very strange. It was a schoolboy with dark hair and a very cold look named Kim Do-ha, who decided not to go home after school and stayed out until late at night. Did you know? He was holding a real pigeon in his hands and rejoiced that pigeons lack well-developed muscles for moving their eyes. The pigeon was very worried and looked nervously straight at the guy as he continued to talk about how after you hold its neck this way, stab it slowly with a knife near its heart. It seems that this is not the first pigeon to end his life this way, thanks to the guy, because he does it without any regret or worry. Then you will notice it moving its head to see where it was stabbed. The animal only tried to squeeze its paw one last time to reduce its suffering somehow, while the guy hesitated and added, or maybe not, it might just be struggling. In the pigeon's eyes, you could clearly see the reflection of the guy, who was really excited about this action. He seemed to really enjoy hurting others. He also added that the important thing is that the pigeon is looking right at him. After all, if there was no such contact, he really wouldn't be interested in doing it. So he first decided to feed another pigeon and give it a nibble. Then he smiled and got ready for the next step. You can really easily spot his intimidating smile, which clearly indicates that the guy has a bit of an aberration. After he caught the animal, he quickly brushed off some of the animal's feathers and threw them to the ground, after which the poor animal flew down just the same, which the guy continued to watch without any regrets. After that, he became very confused and frightened, because he was worried about what could happen to him if someone saw this situation from the outside. As you may have already noticed, he is a psychopath, which he even realizes himself. A 4-story educational institution with an orange facade, with a rooftop deck and trees and shrubs in the courtyard. Here, in a classroom among the teacher and students, Kim Do-ha is studying, while everyone else is having fun, discussing watching a new zombie video on YouTube. A cold-eyed, psychopathic guy is drawing with a black pencil in his notebook. A boy and a girl passing by noticed his work. They froze in fear. The frightened girl said it was creepy and the protagonist was a real psycho, and then suggested that we ignore him. The drawing showed a pigeon with its wings spread and being stabbed in the heart, bleeding, while at the same time its left leg was cut off and flying down. Kim Do-ha agrees with his classmate, for indeed, other than killing, he is not much interested in anything else. After stopping his pencil and finishing drawing, the protagonist stopped his cold gaze at the drawing. Behind the cash register of the cafe, the 21-year-old, blonde-haired, white-shirted, brown apron-clad barista, Jisoo Lee, asks the main character what he has decided to order. Sitting at a cozy table in the cafe, the guy is shaken by the fact that he recently met someone he is interested in. It is dark and overcast, with only 2 lanterns and light from the windows of a 2-story cafe illuminating the street. The main character sits alone at a table with his coffee on it. Not far from him at a table, a guy is watching a horrifying video of a man in a green suit with a green tie and a white shirt running toward the cameraman with an animalistic scream, reaching forward with his left hand toward the camera. He is covered in blood. His pale skin shows large blue veins, his mouth wide open, and his gaze inhuman. In the background, another man in yellow clothes bites a girl with long blonde hair. She screams in pain. The cameraman yells in horror to stay away from him, at which point the video stops. A frightened viewer with dark hair and a gray sweatshirt does not understand what this video is about. He finds it disgusting. He has heard that there are more and more people like that lately, his girlfriend staring fearfully at the phone screen. The video was broadcast on the news. The presenter, with a serious expression on his face, continues. They are talking about a zombie virus. An argument arises between the couple about whether this is true. The footage is truly frightening. People are divided in the comments. One person recognizes his 24-year-old classmate, whom he hasn't seen for days, while the others assume that he is either moonlighting at the movies or is already infected and therefore already impossible to contact. Against this backdrop, the main character is pondering what to do. He has never been in these situations. Sometimes he just asks himself, do I really need her? Is there anything I can gain from her or something? As he continued to drink his drink, he decided there was no point. But then what? Thinking back to the dead pigeon, he realizes that he feels a vivid sense of admiration only when he wants to hurt someone. Sitting quietly at a table and looking at Jisoo Lee's back, Kim Do-ha wonders what if he really wants to kill her. Leaving the cafe, the guy says goodbye, to which the girl barista wondered why he was leaving so early. Without turning around, Do-ha calmly replied, "I'm going to kill some pigeons." Looking at the back of the guy leaving the cafe with an expression of surprise and mild fright, Jisoo Lee wonders why this weird student made such a joke. Leaving the cafe, Kim Do-ha headed down the dark, empty street toward the playground where he had killed the bird earlier. As he watched the pigeons, he imagined strangling Jisoo Lee and watching her in tears, losing her strength to suffocate. Or maybe he wants to stab her. Finished dreaming about the girl, Kim Do-ha caught the pigeon running away from him. A moment later, he threw another dead body of the bird into the pit. Do-ha instantly experienced anger after Jisoo Lee exchanged phone numbers with a stranger. The protagonist got really angry. Kim Do-ha nervously holds the knife, though his hand is trembling. This time it will be different. With the icy stare of a true maniac, he looks toward the door of the cafe, out of which comes a seemingly contented red-headed guy. Watching around the corner for the man of interest, Do-ha sees that he looks rather strange. He has pale skin with large veins. The guy takes a cell phone call, answering his caller. Her number? Of course, I got it. Who do you think I am? By the way, I wasn't in a good mood today. The redhead holding the cell phone has a distinct bite on his hand. At the same time, an angry Kim Do-ha runs to the possibly infected man who continues his conversation, mentioning that a strange lady first clung to him on the way to the cafe, and then she even bit him. Barely had the protagonist grabbed the red-haired boy by the shoulder when he turned to him with a piercing stare. At the same moment, Do-ha stabbed him in the shoulder with his knife. A cold sweat appeared on his face, and he realized that he had made a serious mistake when he saw his victim up close. It was a real zombie. The sight of him was terrifying. The infected man roared like a real beast. Kim Do-ha stared into his wide-open mouth in bewilderment. For the first time, we see such fear in the eyes of the main character. The infected guy was able to lift Do-ha with ease, holding him by the neck. With a horrified expression on his face, the redhead bit the shoulder of the captured boy. Student screamed in pain, covering his left eye and trying to hold on to the zombie with his left hand. In a weakened voice, Do-ha cried out in pain, his bite wound bleeding. When he finished, the red-headed man threw his victim under the fence that stood in front of him. After what happened, the exhausted Do-ha remained lying against the fence, his mouth bleeding and his eyes staring downward. He lost consciousness. Meanwhile, at Mac's Coffee, nothing seemed to be going wrong. The smiling Jisoo stood in front of another customer who asked for her number. In an awkward position, she once again said, "Sorry, but I have a boyfriend." As he left the cafe, the disappointed guy in the hoodie and warm jacket wished him a good day, to which the barista replied to come again. As she continued to do her job, she was interrupted by a frisky customer in a hoodie and a hat, who burst into the cafe and apologized loudly. Again? Jisoo thought in bewilderment, with evident shortness of breath and perspiration on his face. The guy hurriedly asked if there was an emergency exit or a back door. The barista replied with surprise that there was none, and wondered why he was asking that in the first place. Jisoo suspected something was wrong. The visitor hurriedly began to close the doors, causing the barista to misunderstand. She said, "Hey, what are you doing?" Meanwhile, the zombies were approaching the cafe, which was probably the only building so brightly lit in the vicinity. A nervous customer shouted to the whole hall, "We must switch off the lights and the music." Not understanding the situation, Jisoo said, "Why all of a sudden? What exactly are you doing here?" "I'm going to call the police." One of the infected rushed to the door light with all his might. Meanwhile, inside the cafe, a hurried visitor said with a serious face that he was not frightened by the police, adding that it seems that the girl does not even know what is going on in the streets now. Their dialogue was interrupted by the loud noise of the cracked glass of the front door. Frightened with surprise, Jisoo and the guy in the hat looked in the direction of the sound. There was an infected man outside the door window, beating against the glass with an animalistic scream. A moment later, the glass broke and a zombie with inhuman eyes and a loud scream reached through the hole in the door. The sharp splinters cut the infected girl's stomach, but she didn't even pay attention to it. Blood flowed down the door. Everyone in the cafe was shocked by what happened. An agitated Jisoo, holding her cell phone in her hand, informed people that she was calling the police. The customer was outraged, saying that the girl who burst through the door was crazy, and his girlfriend agreed, asking him to stay away from her. Another guy sitting at a separate table unrestrainedly complained about the noise. "Damn it! They are already here," the guy in the hat said excitedly. Jisoo, who was standing nearby, stared in amazement at the face of the girl who had made a fuss. One of the diners at the cafe asked the others if anyone could call an ambulance, since her call was not being taken. It looks like the line was busy at the time. One guy in the hall decided to examine the poor woman. He asked his girlfriend to stay behind him. At this point, the guy in the hat was all standing next to the infected woman lying on the floor, who occasionally growled like an animal. As he approached the girl, a brave guy in the hall asked if she was all right. But when he heard a human voice, the zombie instantly attacked him, biting his right arm. The wounded man screamed in pain, a cold sweat forming on his face, clearly not expecting this. He said that hurt so bad. What the hell is wrong with this crazy woman? Realizing the complexity of the situation, the guy in the hat who broke into the cafe before the zombies arrived suggested that we get out of the place. He asked if there was anyone on the second floor, and Jisoo replied that there was no one there. Hearing her answer, the guy told the barista to run and headed for the second floor himself. The girl just looked at his back in surprise. Pretty soon, the guy the zombie bit had inhuman features, red eyes and large veins in his face. His skin turned pale, and he growled. His companion tried to find out what was wrong with him, if he was all right. But when she heard the girl's voice, he pounced on her, knocking the victim to the ground and biting her on the neck. Lying on the floor, screaming in pain, the wounded girl begged him to stop, asking people to save her. Jisoo was absolutely terrified of what was happening, and she sat on the floor with her arms crossed, screaming in the background. After seeing the girl who had just been bitten lose her mind and become a zombie, the barista decided to get out of this place as soon as possible. Meanwhile, the other infected people from the street who heard the noise were already approaching the cafe. Someone in the cafeteria hall frightened them by asking if they were all crazy, and the customer replied that she didn't know what was wrong with them, but they should call an ambulance. After their reasoning, the zombies pounced on them as well. Jisoo clenched her teeth in fear and chose the right moment to run to the second floor. She made her way to the stairs, carefully avoiding the wounded and infected people who were still conscious, but who did not understand what was happening. They were begging for help. Climbing the stairs, Jisoo went to the door and pulled it open. The door was locked, impossible to open no matter how hard she tried. She immediately remembered the guy in the hat who ran to the second floor before her. Jisoo panicked and started banging on the door and asking for it to be opened, shouting, "Hurry, you bastard!" Her scream was interrupted by a strange sound behind her. Turning her head toward the stairs, Jisoo noticed that she had attracted one of the zombies. Continuing to look at him, a cold sweat forming on her frightened face. The red eyes of the infected man stared viciously at the girl at the door, and he began to run toward her with a scream, followed by the rest of the zombies. Jisoo put her back against the door, closed her eyes, and cried in her thoughts, begging to be saved. When Jisoo opened her eyes, she saw a blood-stained stranger grabbing the neck of the zombie standing right in front of her with one hand. Meanwhile, the residential neighborhoods are still in the dead of night, and Kim Do-ha himself is lying on a bench outside his house, with his arms spread apart, having also suffered quite unpleasant injuries. He noticed his shirt and abruptly tried to stand up to see what was happening to him. At the same time, he began to examine his hands. After that, he was in a state of maximum panic and worry about himself. His eyes became zombie-like. One eye began to bleed and his blood vessels dilated dramatically, which really frightened the guy. There was also blood splatter on the wall, and by the lantern there was still a guy who Kim Do-ha turned to and complained, "Man, that hurt." He was very angry and looked in his direction. It was obvious that right now he wanted to take revenge and destroy him, just like he liked to do to pigeons. But the guy with the red hair was undeterred, so as soon as he heard the words in his direction, he abruptly turned around and became very aggressive. It's no wonder he was a zombie who immediately ran to attack, screaming. But Kim Do-ha was also serious, so he met him with his strong fist, which made the zombie even look a little surprised. The guy's eyes suspiciously began to glow like a superhero's, and his fist itself had very large veins that had formed after the bite, for which he wanted revenge. After such a hard blow, the zombie's body shattered into several pieces, and only his legs remained standing on the ground. Even Kim Do-ha himself was surprised by this turn of events, because he did not expect things to turn out this way at all, and his blow would be so strong. But anyway, the guy was very pleasantly surprised, so he started smiling and looking at his hand. But this is a lot better than killing some measly pigeons. After that, he was attacked by another mob of zombies who wanted revenge for their comrade. The guy's eyes lit up again, and he calmly stopped and waited for them, adding that he didn't understand what had happened right away. He also got a little nervous when he saw the face of another zombie, which inspired fear. "I thought I was going to die when that guy bit me." After looking around, he was alarmed to see two huge monsters with red eyes standing behind him. So he decided to act immediately, and began to attack them by taking off and throwing off his vest. But not only am I fine, I can feel an overwhelming power within me. And while the zombies continued to attack him in bunches, he calmly continued to destroy them without any problem or effort on his part, and so completely destroyed the head of one of the monsters. He was very surprised, because he did not understand what became of his body, and destroying with unthinkable force, another monster continued to be shocked, also from what the heck is wrong with these people? But they continued to run at him with great force. They were not stopped by the fact that their comrades had already been hurt by such a thing. Kim Do-ha saw this and got even angrier and started yelling at the whole block of flats in the middle of the night. His screams could be heard even in the farthest corners of the neighborhood. And so, he stands tired, furious, and beaten after another fight. He wiped out everyone in front of him, and behind him came another pack of enemies just like him. But that wasn't what was most important to him. He looked in the direction of the storefront, the window of which glowed in the middle of the dark night, and wondered. He also didn't understand how he could get rid of these zombies that were constantly coming at him. And most importantly, why is his heart pounding so loudly? It's been a long time since he felt this kind of emotion. Perhaps right now he's already realized what it was like for the pigeons he was destroying. After that, terrified, he ran up the arms of the dead zombies, trying to escape the others who were screaming and running after him, trying to destroy him. That store seemed to be the only hope for the boy that gave him a chance at salvation. And now he was getting closer and closer, with not much left. After that, a hand grabbed the guy's neck tightly, which was very hard to imagine. I am dying to know what this feeling is. Kim Do-ha grabbed another zombie he tried to talk to, but heard no response. So he took it and tore it apart and saved the girl who was standing by the cash register. They looked at each other, and the girl was very frightened when she saw Kim Do-ha. She could not understand who he was. But he continued to be angry because the zombies kept up with them. On the contrary, their number increased by the minute, which made him even angrier, adding that you guys keep bothering me. So he destroyed every zombie, going up the stairwell, saving survivors and non-infected people. He had a lot of fun in the moment, and a smile appeared on his face. All this because destroying monsters in rage mode is really much more enjoyable and interesting than torturing poor pigeons, which is what the guy was doing all the time before. After taking care of all the zombies, he quickly descended to the first floor, heading for the exit, where another zombie was already waiting for him, who also managed to destroy the rescuer. But there was not much choice, so I had to look at and analyze the current situation. He looked at the monsters and added that so far, the people that those things have bitten rise again as zombies. After that, he got the genius idea that maybe he should get rid of them all. Without thinking twice, he grabbed a chair with his hand and broke the heads of the monsters with it. But another batch of zombies ran toward him very quickly, chasing him. Yes, it was very annoying indeed, so he instantly grabbed a chair in his hands again and ran to attack. Totally unexpectedly, something scary happened, because the zombie, who a few minutes ago was still on his way to save him, himself, and gave him a critical bite, which really surprised the guy. After all, Kim Do-ha really fought them so well, and took damage from the least noteworthy enemy. It made him very scared and angry at the same time, because immediately after that, he flew to the other end of the room and hit the wall, grabbing his head and trying not to turn into the same zombie. The same girl from the store that he saved was watching all this. She was very shocked and hoped that all this madness was just a dream, right? She glanced again at the guy, who was smiling suspiciously and fixing his face. Is he a monster too? But why? Without thinking long, she decided that she had to help him right now, despite the danger in front of her, because a few minutes earlier he had saved the girl's life, or rather one would assume so, but in reality she said the following: "No, I need to get out of here first." The boy tried to reach out his hand to help her, but she didn't care. The girl ran to the stairs and saw the monsters coming right toward her. She sat down on the stairs and was very frightened of the zombie reaching for her. It looked like he was going to destroy her right now, because a few seconds later he had already grabbed her leg, which made her panic a lot and start screaming, telling him to let go. She was very scared and didn't want to die, but the zombie didn't care. He had already opened his mouth to take another bite and change this girl's life forever. Suddenly, Kim Do-ha appears and manages to save the girl by breaking the zombie's head with a broom he managed to pick up. He was also jokingly frightened, but said he would protect the girl anyway. She was very surprised and couldn't believe it either. So she wanted to ask him why he thought that, because this is also the first time this has happened to her, and she is not sure why. Kim Do-ha also stood with a broom in his hands and even reflected on the situation, suggesting that the girl come to think of it. They sat down across from each other and began to talk, the guy assuring her that now her heart isn't pounding wildly anymore. Did he really have feelings for her?